and Ms. Dummett. So if you want to step to the microphone here, please.
Handout as well that you guys.
Great.
I can introduce myself though. My name is Mrs. Siders. I teach at Jackson High School. I teach science. Some of my students are here tonight. I see some Boy Scouts and other supporting students. I teach environmental science and physical science to freshmen, and I run a club at the high school called YCAT, and it stands for Youth Climate Action Team. So essentially we do climate-friendly and eco-friendly based projects at the high school. So we compost at lunch. We are making like seed paper Valentines, using some of the recycled paper that we have at the high school that we save from classrooms. So tonight, one of the projects that my club has been talking about actually for 2 years is starting a community garden, and the process of what that involves and who that would involve and also who it would help and educate. So Maya has written something. She's the project lead on this. I have 2 other project leads over there. One who plans like the litter cleanups we do around town as a club, and then another one who's doing those seed paper Valentines, so they're here as well. But Maya's gonna kind of explain the idea and the background of this idea of a community garden and kind of propose to all of you where we would want to have it. It would be on city property, and then kind of some of the benefits. Ready?
Yeah. So I have written that YCAT stands for Youth Climate Action Team, and it is a club at JHS. And at the high school, we work on several projects like composting at the school lunches, litter cleanups around town, recycling paper from classrooms, and more eco-friendly initiatives. We knew we wanted to create a project that everyone in Jackson could use somehow, rather than just focusing on the school. Over the last few years in Jackson, the city of Jackson has dismissed some environmental actions, including completely eradicating the recycling system. Though recently, Mayor Randy Evans has planted several apple trees near our local CVS and park, the members of YCAT believe we can take an even larger step forward by implementing a community garden for all of the community to enjoy and share. Not only students, but citizens can garden and enjoy fresh produce grown by the whole community. We could also promote elementary schools by having specific plots that are children appropriate. In addition, some of what we can grow can go towards the farmers market. We can plan to create a rotation in our club for equal care for the garden, meaning constant upkeep all year round. And in the future, we hope to provide gardening lessons and how to care for certain plants in the season. What we have circled on the paper is where we could put the garden. And then we had some questions regarding the water system, right?
Mm-hmm. So like the space would be across the street from Eddie Jones, so like the map that we have that isn't in color, but it has 2 kind of circles on there that are kind of by the C-shaped parking lot where the farmers market gets set up. Obviously everyone who lives in Jackson knows that Eddie Jones Park floods very regularly, so we're kind of aware of where the flood zone is. But if there is a space that's kind of more towards the railroad track would be where we would want to use. And we would start with a smaller plot. We have a bunch of soil and compost we've been collecting kind of over time for an initiative like this. And we aren't partial to that spot. I think for the people in our club, we're hoping that makes sense because it's close in proximity to the farmers market, right? Judge Music is planning, I talked to him about this project, and he's planning to do a garden kind of nearby on the end of where Water Street ends. And Danny Barger, who's the Soil and Water Conservation rep, said that he would also assist us in helping with some plants and maybe for some fruit trees to start us up. So we wanted to hear from all of you, I guess your perspective and how we go about making this happen.
Questions, thoughts, council?
Well, I'm going to ask a couple questions. Until just recently, I hadn't seen your plan for the raised beds.
Oh, yeah. Like
And,
design of them.
right,
Yeah.
so you're looking at something more permanent, or year after year?
Yeah, probably, I mean, there's pros and cons to, tilling right into the ground versus setting up raised beds, which is like the second picture on there, which is like setting up 2 by 8 by 12s, essentially making like a large rectangle on the ground, so then it's easier to kind of weed eat around and maintain weeds and things like that. It's kind of easier to say, okay, south view, this could be your plot, and north view, this could be yours, and if a restaurant wanted to grow something specific, we can say this is yours, rather than having a big tilled rectangle and saying like, this is your row. This thing is kind of
Yeah. I've got a slight advantage, because I printed one out for the mayor and myself.
Maybe you're the only one who got that.
Yeah, so the rest of the group, the rest of the group doesn't have this. Another thing I heard you say was planting trees. We know trees are more of a long-term investment. So I look at your 2 circles. A couple things come to mind. The one closest railroad track isn't city-owned property.
That part isn't, okay.
Okay, that belongs to Mr. Sexton. And the other one is where the trailer is parked for the Apple Festival that has the multiple hydrants and
Right
stuff in there.
So that's where the water hookup is, so neither of those spaces are like optimal or at all can be used?
Well, one, if you're looking for raised beds, and if you're doing something, I'll say seasonal, where you'd be out there by September, then the Apple Festival stuff going in there wouldn't have an issue. But when you're talking about planting trees and doing something that could be used year after year, I don't think you would want to do that in that area because of that reason. And of course, I can't speak to the Mr. Sexton's piece.
Yeah, true. Any other comments or ideas?
Mayor?
I'd just like to thank you all for coming and your interest in environmental science. I do want to say, though, that we haven't eradicated the recycling system. There are 8 recycling dumpsters in the city of Jackson still to be used for recycling. And I'm reading that because I too got a copy of the cheat sheet here. And, we'll work with you if we can, working with the service director here, help you try to find a place. If you're doing raised beds, I guess the first thought I think of is, seems like it would be a lot more convenient to be at the school, since this is a school project. And it seems like there would be places there to do that. But if there's not, I'm just thinking of kids getting there and stuff to work it. But if not, we'll work with you to try to find a place.
Okay, like a spot. The only thing
Yep.
that, we talked about previously was just having a water hookup, and I think that's the more complicated aspect of it, is where that would come from. I have about 60 students in the environmental club, and there's a lot of students who are willing to help, and I think that starting small is successful. The previous school that I taught at, we ran a school garden as well, and we picked specific things that were partial to the people who lived here, right? So planting apple trees, fantastic idea, that's what people want to see, right? We're the apple city, and there's a huge apple above our town, right? And I think there's other things that, I think if we plan it effectively, right, we don't have to grow tomatoes and corn, right? It can be something that educate rather than defeat a bunch of people, right? Just getting people to kind of do something together. But if there's any other city property that you would consider, we would definitely be willing to hear any other ideas that you may have.
Other thoughts, questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. Absolutely. Next on our agenda is a consideration for the minutes. The packet of minutes were in, or I should say the minutes were in your packet. Any corrections, objections to the minutes as presented to council this evening? Hearing none, entertain a motion to accept the minutes as presented to council. Mr. Peters?
to assess.
Second to Ms. Colby. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The motion is carried. Next, we will go into our committee reports. We'll start with Utility Committee. Mr. Ondera?
No report.
Thank you, Mr. Ondera. Budget and Finance, Ms. Colby?
No report.
Thank you, Ms. Colby. Police, Fire, and Traffic, Mr. Foster?
I have no report.
Thank you, Mr. Foster. Service, Mr. Peters?
Other than the topic of the brush pickup, I only have one person reach out to me, so it's been 2 weeks, so I'll move on to the administration with the suggestions, so.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. Mr. Reed, anything on, from the auditor's office?
No report.
Thank you. Mr. Kirby?
I have no report.
Thank you. Chief Hinch, no report? Thank you, Chief Hinch. We're going to change the order just a little bit, so we're going to go, Mr. Swackhammer.
Yeah, I've only got a couple items, and then I'm going to give the mayor the rest of the time for his annual report. In your packets tonight, will have the summary from the code enforcement activity, as well as the Fairmont Cemetery for 2022. And so, at your leisure, take a look at that so you can see the activities that have occurred in both of those.
Mr. Peters?
I did not receive the code enforcement.
I didn't get it.
I will make sure that Council Clerk gets a copy of this to pass out.
Okay, I'm going to put it, I'll also put it in your email. For a second. Other questions for the Service Director? Mayor?
Yes, well, to all you kids that are here that just heard all those no reports, I've got a long report, so you're gonna get your money's worth for coming tonight. But, no, just kidding, it's not really long. But tonight I'm giving my annual report, also known as the State of the City Report, which is typical for mayors, just like the president, to do once a year. So this is today's, for this year. And I was trying to finish this up yesterday while I was watching the Bengals. And while I was looking at last year's annual report. And last year in the report, I stated that how we're really just one big team here. And the better we work together, the more wins we have for Jackson. And so after the game was over and I was pretty much finished up, I told my wife, I'm going to go in there tomorrow, meaning right now, and I'm going to give this speech like Joe Burrow would. And she laughed. She actually laughed out loud and said, maybe more like, I got to get this up on here, maybe more like Joe Namath, but not Cool Joe, not Cool Joe Burrow. Well, I looked it up. Joe Namath is 79 years old today. Anyway, each year, since I've been here, I like to remind myself, as well as you guys, what my goals were 4 years ago when I ran for mayor. And I had 3 goals, and if you remember, I campaigned on 3 goals. Well, number 1, I wanted to see my hometown managed more efficiently, more productively, and more professionally. Well, we continue today working to reorganize and modify our staffing needs of the city to meet today's needs and to take care of today's needs as efficiently and productively as possible. We continue to look at our processes to try to find new and better ways to provide the services. We exist to provide services to our citizens, and we want to do that well. Second, I wanted city utility rates to be more competitive while still providing great services to our citizens. Once again, we can all proudly claim that utility rates, again, in 2022, have not been raised in the city of Jackson. The rate cuts that we previously made with council and the lack of any new increases has made our city utility rates much more competitive and in line with other area providers. And we continue to provide outstanding utility service and fast response anytime there's a problem. And third, I wanted to clean up and fix up my hometown. We continue efforts to clean up and fix up our town, and it's making a huge difference. In the last year, our code enforcement officer has dealt with over 400 cases of ordinance violation, of high weeds or litter and trash. He's dealt with 18 cases of unsafe buildings, and we had 6 building demolitions. We continue working with the land bank, and right now we have bids out for the demolition of 11 more unsafe and dilapidated structures in the city. So as I begin my 4th year as mayor, these things continue to be my goals for the city, and I'm proud that we are making progress in all these areas. And by we, I mean all of us here at this table, all my staff, and all city employees. There's some other things I want to mention. First, the income tax. The city income tax provided us over $3.8 million in revenue last year. Remember, most of that income comes from people who live outside our city. And much of that tax, if we didn't collect it, would go to another city. The income tax allowed us to budget for over $1.5 million of additional infrastructure for 2023, most of which will once again be paving, repairs, and related work. Without the income tax, our paving program would not be possible. The income tax also provides for over half of the $2+ million police budget. Eventually, the income tax may provide the entire police budget. But without the income tax, we would have a very small police department, if we had one at all. Project and grants, we continue our efforts to identify infrastructure improvement projects and to acquire grant money to fund them. Our water, wastewater, and stormwater systems are all old, in need of repairs and replacement in most areas of the city. We spend a lot of our time determining what our greatest needs are and how to get the funding for that. Most of our city-owned buildings are also in need of repair or replacement, and we plan to start addressing them in the coming years. Paving, with the income tax revenue, we paved over 6 miles of 31 different streets last year, and every penny of that came from the income tax. We also partnered with ODOT and paved State Route 93 all the way through town, and finished West Broadway, and finally, this year, with ODOT, plans to pave East Broadway, which has been in the work for a number of years. Our plan is once again to repair and pave every street in town, and that's 52 miles of streets, plus the parks, plus the parking lots. And it's going to take probably 8 to 10 years to get them all done, and then it'll be time to start over. Our parks, at Hillcrest Parks, this past year we added 2 new shelter houses that we did with our in-house staff, and we added additional features to the skate park. This year we plan to replace the old fencing, improve the basketball courts, renovate the basketball courts, I should say, and expand the parking area. At Hammertown Lake, we have plans for a new boat ramp, a dock with a kayak launch, as well as improving handicap accessibility and parking. Once again, that's grant money that we will be doing that work with. Our IT and GIS departments, we continue making progress with our GIS mapping project that we started the year before last. The goal was to capture geographical locations and data for all city utilities in a mapping system. Recently, we installed software, and our workers in the field are beginning to use this information for utility locating and to track work orders. We plan to add a new IT tech this year to provide additional support for our computer systems as well as for our GIS program. Our service departments. Our street and alley department continues to upgrade streets, curbs, and sidewalks. Last year, and we'll continue to do that this year. Our garbage service, even though Rumpke drastically raised the land fee dumping fees this year, we have not raised garbage fees that we charge our citizens. We have new mechanics in the garage. They continue to do a great job maintaining our 46 pieces of equipment and 77 vehicles and work trucks. And even though we increased the cemetery budget last year, we still struggled with the massive task of keeping those 62 acres mowed and looking nice. We'll continue to working on improving on that, because the cemetery is an important service for our citizens. We did complete paving the existing cemetery streets last year and have begun a preliminary layout for future cemetery expansion. Utility departments include electric, water, wastewater, and utility office. These departments continue to provide incredibly reliable service to our customers. And they respond very quickly when problems arise. We will continue improving efficiency by making in-house upgrades with our own personnel. Again, yet another year with 0 increases in utility rates. We've worked with our electric consultants to have 2 pieces of legislation before you now. One, to update our electric rate structure to more align with the current industry standards. This is a restructuring, not a rate increase. And also legislation to provide policy and direction for small electric generation by our citizens, such as solar power. This is a policy that the city has never had before. Providing reliable and efficient electric, water, and wastewater service for the community continues to be a top priority. Water line breaks are common due to the age of our lines, and improper infiltration of water into our wastewater system is very costly at the plant. Current projects to help address these needs include the Mitchell to Wood Sewer Replacement Project that is about wrapped up, the Mill Street area sewer and water projects that we've talked a lot about lately, the main trunk line sewer lining project, as well as the South Street water replacement project. We were awarded over $5 million in grant funding in 2022. We have several grants still pending. We continue working to identify and prioritize infrastructure and repair and replacement projects. We spend a tremendous amount of time seeking outside funding for these projects. The auditor's office performed very nicely in 2022 and recently received an outstanding audit report from the state. Our police department continues efforts to rebuild, but is hampered by the national shortage of police officers, as well as a shortage of police vehicles. Regardless, we're very pleased with the advances made in that department. Even with the smaller police numbers, the JPD recorded 1,334 traffic stops last year, 868 arrests last year, and a dramatic increase to 6,834 total calls. Also before council tonight is a new police labor contract that will help us retain and attract police officers. This administration recently negotiated and reached this tentative agreement with our police union without either side using any outside counsel. Our fire department has had success in rebuilding its numbers, and they now are 14 members strong in the all-volunteer fire department, up from a dangerous low of 6 members just a few years ago. In 2022, also had the highest call numbers in history of the Jackson Fire Department, with 329 call-outs. In conclusion, I've touched on a lot of good things here tonight. There's a lot of good things going on in the city. But I want to leave you with these 2 thoughts. One, we exist as a government here to provide services to our citizens. That is why we're here. We need to do that very well and very efficiently. And 2, The money that we spend here comes from taxes and utility revenues. We need to be good stewards of those dollars and spend it wisely and efficiently. City income tax provides funding for our streets and our infrastructure improvements and our police department, and we couldn't do either very well without it. In closing, I've said this before, I'm just the mayor. Everyone at this table is part of our team. The more we work together, the more wins Jackson gets. And I truly thank each of you for your role in making it all work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
At this time, we will step into the ordinances and resolutions that are before you this evening. We'll start with second reading, ordinance 0223. Ms. Kuhn?
An ordinance repealing and amending the City of Jackson's codified ordinance section 179.01, establishing the membership of the Tree Commission.
Discussion. Any further action on ordinance 223? Hearing none, this constitutes the second reading of ordinance 223. Next, to ordinance requiring first reading, we will begin with ordinance 323. Ms. Kuhn?
An ordinance replacing and amending the City of Jackson electric utility rates as set forth in the City of Jackson codified ordinances as section 921.06 through 921.10 and declaring an emergency.
Could I get a motion to adopt ordinance 323 as presented to council this evening? Mr. Peters, is there a second? Mr. Ondera? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. The motion is carried. Discussion. Is there any further action to be taken on ordinance 323? Hearing none, this constitutes the first reading of ordinance 323. Next, on first reading, ordinance 423. Ms. Kuhn?
An ordinance adopting policies and procedures for the interconnection of behind-the-meter generators and Schedule SPP small power production electric rate applicable to energy supplied by BTM generators.
Could I get a motion to adopt ordinance 423 as presented to council? Mr. Peters? Second by Mr. Newkirk. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion is carried. Discussion.
I'll just say, this ordinance and the one before it, or the two I referenced earlier, I see on 4 that, and at least in my book, it's not attached. But both of these we realize are very difficult issues, and if you have any questions that you want to reach out to us with, we're going to have to go to the consultant probably anyway, so try to get that to us before the next reading. And the behind-the-meter small power generation, there should be an attachment that we can get to y'all to try to understand it. That's all.
Thank you, Mayor. Other discussion? Any further action on ordinance 423? This constitutes the first reading of ordinance 423. Next, consideration is ordinance 523. Ms. Kuhn?
An ordinance creating Fund Number 412, Mill Street Sewer Replacement Project Fund, and declaring an emergency.
Could we have a motion to adopt ordinance 523 as presented to council? Mr. Newkirk, is there a second? Ms. Colby? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. The motion is carried. Discussion. Mr. Reed?
We're just setting up the fund for another grant that was received and keeping it separate. So I'd appreciate council if they would pass this. All it is creating the fund.
Other discussion? Mr. Peters?
Do we have the funds? Do we have the funds? The status of the funds for the projects?
It has been approved. We just have not received the funds yet. We need a line item to receive them into when they do make them available to us.
Mr.
Motion to suspend the rules, second by Mr. Andera. Any other discussion? Ms. Kuhn?
Foster.
Yes.
Andera.
Yes.
Colby. Yes. Peters.
Yes.
Newkirk.
Yes.
Crabtree.
Yes.
Bop.
Further discussion? Ms. Kuhn?
Foster.
Yes.
Andera.
Yes.
Colby. Yes. Peters.
Yes.
Newkirk. Crabtree. Bop.
Ordinance 523 is duly adopted. Next, moving on to ordinance 623 for first reading. Ms. Kuhn?
An ordinance approving additional appropriations to the Lillian Jones Project Expense Fund and declaring an emergency.
We have a motion to adopt ordinance 623 as presented to council this evening. Mr. Crabtree, is there a second? Mr. Peters? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Discussion. Mr. Reed?
The Lillian Jones applied and received a grant for the $900 that's present here. And they actually received it at the end of last year, but we didn't put it in the budget because they wouldn't have had time to appropriate it and spend it. So they're asking that it be put into their budget this year so she can use it.
Any other discussion?
Motion to suspend the rules?
Motion by Mr. Andera to suspend the rules. Is there a second? Ms. Colby, second. Other discussion? Ms. Kuhn?
Foster.
Yes.
Andera.
Yes.
Colby. Yes. Peters.
Yes.
Newkirk. Crabtree.
Yes.
Bop.
Discussion further? Ms. Kuhn?
Foster.
Yes.
Andera.
Yes.
Colby. Peters.
Yes.
Newkirk.
Yes.
Crabtree.
Yes.
Bop.
Ordinance 623 is duly adopted. Next, we will consider ordinance 723. Ms. Kuhn?
An ordinance authorizing the mayor or service director of the city of Jackson to enter into an agreement with the Teamsters Local Union 637, the bargaining unit for the Jackson police officers, and to execute the contract between the city and Teamsters Local Union 637 as required and declaring an emergency.
Can we get a motion to adopt ordinance 723 as presented to council? Mr. Newkirk, is there a second? Mr. Bob? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion is carried. Discussion, Mr. Schweikhammer.
Yes, as the mayor mentioned in his State of the City address, this is the contract that the administration and the local police union representatives have signed as a tentative agreement. This will go in effect in September of this year. So that's the timeline. And I am pleased to say that we were able to do it without any outside people involved, either for us or for them. And I think it puts us very competitive in today's market of acquiring the best individuals available. We were behind a little bit in some of our scale, and we were losing officers to neighboring counties, and this should correct that.
Thank you, Mr. Schweikhammer. Other comments, discussion? Any further action to be taken on ordinance 723? Hearing none, this constitutes the first reading of ordinance 723. Next, for our consideration would be ordinance 823. Ms. Kuhn?
An ordinance repealing and amending the City of Jackson's codified ordinance section 147.13 regarding seasonal employees and declaring an emergency.
Got to get a motion to adopt ordinance 823 as presented to council. Mr. Peters, is there a second? Mr. Andera? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The motion is carried. Discussion, Mr. Schweikhammer.
Yes, last fall, if you'll remember, council agreed that they wanted to move forward with doing the cemetery in-house and not outsourcing it. We know that the last 2 years we've had trouble getting seasonal employees. Council had made the recommendation that we raise the hourly wage, and to do so, we had to adjust the ordinance. Originally, the ordinance was for 150% of minimum wage, and at that rate last year, we did not get enough individuals So this takes it to 200% plus minimum wage has recently increased. So between the combination of the two, it should allow me to get to the level that council so suggested to acquire individuals.
Other discussion? Mr. Peters?
Yeah, I moved to suspend the rules. This is not a drastic increase from what it was. And the sooner that council passes it, the sooner we can start advertising for summer help. So I moved to suspend for that reason.
Motion by Mr. Peters, second by Mrs. Colby. Further discussion? Ms. Kuhn?
Foster.
Yes.
Wondera.
Yes.
Colby. Yes. Peters.
Yes.
Newkirk. Crabtree.
Yes.
Bach.
Other discussion? Ms. Kuhn?
Foster.
Yes.
Wondera.
Yes.
Colby. Yes. Peters.
Yes.
Newkirk.
Yes.
Crabtree.
Yes.
Bach.
Yes.
Ordinance 823 is duly adopted. Next, we will move into ordinance 923. Ms. Kuhn?
An ordinance of the legislative authority of the City of Jackson, Ohio, to authorize the mayor or his designee, the chief of the Jackson City Fire Department, to enter into a cooperative agreement for wildland fire suppression and declaring an emergency.
We have a motion to adopt ordinance 923 as presented to council. Mr. Peters, is there a second? Mr. Bob? All those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. The motion is carried. Discussion. Mr. Schweikhammer.
Yes. This one is nothing new, but it is new to council. What, I talked to Chief Channel, I talked to Mr. Kirby. It appears that the city has worked in conjunction with ODNR for several years in helping support for wildfires in the ODNR jurisdiction, but it had never come before council for approval to use city assets in such a manner. So just trying to rectify a few things here and bring it to council's attention and to get council's approval.
Thank you, Mr. Schweikhammer. Other discussion? Mr. Schweikhammer, this does carry the emergency clause. Are we in need of that, or?
There is not a timeline as far as a deadline. ODNR, will look for something in the very near future. Since it was added to the packet late, I have no problem with council taking the time to read and understand it and ask questions.
Anything else, further action on ordinance 923? Hearing none, this constitutes the first reading of ordinance 923. Next, we will move into our resolutions. We will begin with resolution 0323. Ms. Kuhn?
A resolution creating the positions of operations manager and of IT GIS technician and declaring an emergency.
Discussion. Any further action to be taken on resolution 0323? Hearing none, this constitutes the second reading of resolution 0323. Next, resolution for consideration will be resolution 623. Ms. Kuhn?
A resolution authorizing the mayor to apply for, accept, and enter into an Ohio EPA Water Pollution Control Loan Fund, WPCLF, agreement on behalf of the City of Jackson for construction of the Mill Street Sewer Replacement Project, designating a dedicated repayment source for the loan and declaring an emergency.
Could I have a motion to adopt ordinance 623 as presented to council? By Mr. Peters, second by Mr. Wondera. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Discussion. Mr. Schweikhammer.
Yes, this again is one of those grant opportunities. We stand in a very good position here on that. We believe we'll go get loan forgiveness on that grant, loan forgiveness on that loan. Treat it as a grant, basically. I would ask council to go ahead and consider passing it on first reading so we can move along with this funding.
I move that we suspend the rules.
Motion by Mr. Newkirk to suspend the rules. Is there a second? Ms. Colby? Discussion? Ms. Kuhn?
Foster.
Yes.
Mondera.
Yes.
Colby. Yes. Peters.
Yes.
Newkirk. Crabtree. Bop.
Yes.
Further discussion? Ms. Kuhn?
Foster.
Yes.
Mondera.
Yes.
Colby. Yes. Peters.
Yes.
Newkirk.
Yes.
Crabtree.
Yes.
Bop.
Yes.
Resolution 623 is duly adopted. Our final resolution for this evening is Resolution 723 on first reading. Ms. Kuhn?
A resolution authorizing the mayor to file an application with the Ohio Valley Regional Development Commission for transportation funding and declaring an emergency.
Can we get a motion to adopt Resolution 723 as presented to council? Ms. Colby, is there a second? Mr. Crabtree, second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Discussion. Mr. Swackhammer.
Yes, this resolution is to show that the city is willing to set aside this $99,000. We were awarded a grant. This is for the Beaver Pike resurfacing area. This would be the city's portion of that. Part of that is full-depth repairs, but they just wanted something in the form of a resolution that the city was willing to submit to this much, or commit to this much prior to awarding us the grant.
Other discussion?
I would ask that council consider passing it tonight so that we can get it moving with the rest of the paperwork, so we could get those funds possibly yet this year. If not, it'll be an early '24 project.
Thank you, Mr. Swackhammer. Mr. Peters?
Is the 99,267 like our maximum amount that we would?
Well, it's the amount as of right now until, you're never going to know your actual total until it gets bid out. But based upon the engineering estimate and the cost and how the percentages worked out, this would be our percentage.
And Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
how much of Beaver Pike from where to where?
Most of this is not the old State Street, the State Street from High out to, what is the last street going out of town there, where the old...
Maple Avenue.
Yeah, it's not that section, it's moving from that direction out past Westview.
To the corporation limit.
Get out there and you start to split, one side of the road is, one side isn't, but yes, to answer your question.
Other discussion?
And this is I believe a 4-to-1. We're 25%, they're 75% of it.
I make a motion to suspend the rules, Mr. President.
Motion by Mr. Ondera. Is there a second? Mr. Bob, seconds. I'm sorry. Discussion? Ms. Kuhn?
Foster.
Yes.
Mondera.
Yes.
Colby. Yes. Peters.
Yes.
Newkirk. Crabtree.
Yes.
Bop.
Yes.
Discussion? Ms. Kuhn?
Foster.
Yes.
Mondera.
Yes.
Colby. Yes. Peters.
Yes.
Newkirk. Crabtree. Bop.
Yes.
Resolution 723 is duly adopted. Thank you, council, for your work here and the ordinance and resolution. Next, Ms. Kuhn has something in regard to the correspondence.
Yeah, in your package, you should have the Ohio Ethics Commission filing reminder that I give you every year in January. The top part, you need to sign and give back to me, just showing that I have explained that to you, that there is a deadline, and if you miss that deadline, they do start charging you daily, as some of you know. And then there's also some deadlines for candidate filing on that paper also, if you are filing again this year.
Thank you, Ms. Kuhn. We'll step into old business. The one thing that's there on your agenda was the discussion that we had at our last council meeting concerning road work in Franklin Township. Mayor, would you address that for us?
Well, Franklin Township had asked the city in that letter they sent to us, that you met at the last meeting, to take care of that piece of the road, OMAU Road between, well, technically they were asking for like a 10th mile of it between Burlington Road and 32, and there's about 2/10 of a mile there. In the research that my office did, we found that there was an ordinance back in '01, actually, or '02, where the city agreed to maintain that piece of the road. Now, it really doesn't make sense to me because we've got Lick taking care of that road. There's some kind of agreement there, and we haven't actually met with them yet. I think David maybe had preliminarily met with Franklin Township trustees, which is who requested that we take care of that piece of Mayhew Road, the city. And part of that, on the sides of the road, part of that is city property, but we don't believe that the actual road was annexed into the city. And part of this property on one side of the road is not in the city. So we're still working into that. There was an ordinance passed where the city would maintain that. So that's what we'll do if we need to, although it doesn't really make sense to me because we've got Franklin Township doing from Matt Point west and Lick Township doing from Matt Point east, and we'd have that little piece in the middle just between Burlington Road and 32. I don't know if we can work out something there or not, but the city council back in '02 did agree to take care of that, so that's what we'll do if we need to.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yep.
Any other old business to come before council this evening? Looking at new business, is there any new business to, I know we have executive session scheduled, but is there any other new business that should come before council before that? Mr. Bob?
I didn't jump on it right away, but when the ladies were talking about their gardens, I've dealt with Miss Siders up at the high school, and if anybody wants to think about doing this project, she gets things done, and she's got, I think she said 62 students in her, and I can tell you that every day that kids come out of her class, they're very enthused, and I think that it would be something that would be of benefit to everybody. So that's something to think about, that project.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bob.
He stole my thunder. I was gonna speak in favor of the project as well. Would like to see it not be where it is, though. Just, I don't know, there's just not a lot of, other than just passing, there's not like any, where I can look off the side of the road when I'm driving by and say, oh, look, what's that? Great, I want to participate. So it's kind of hidden away beside the park, in my opinion. The other thing we would probably need to solve is obviously utilities. Everyone knows we can't give away city utilities, so we have to figure out a way to help them fund the project as well. So if anybody out there is listening, has a soft spot for children, you can always help them pay their water bill. So, but I would like to see the project move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Peters.
Maybe somewhere more in the center of the community.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Have anything else? Hearing none, I think we are going to go into executive session, so I would entertain a motion for that. Mr. Peters?
Yeah, I'll move that we enter into executive session to consider the employment, discipline, demotion, or compensation of a public employee, and also for reviewing negotiations with public employees concerning their compensation and other terms and conditions of employment. That's a mouthful. I'll also move that everyone seated at the table is welcome to stay, and excluding everyone in the gallery.
Thank you. Is there a second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got nudged.
Foster.
Voice vote, yes.
Ondera.
Yes.
Colby.
Yes.
Peters.
Yes.
Newkirk. Crabtree.
Yes.
Bach.
Yes.
We'll go into executive session. It's 7:52. Mr. Wilson, I would say